Hi, I'm Isabel. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the books that I read in June. So grab a drink, get comfy, and let's chat. First, I want to start with the books that I DNF'd in June. The first book that I DNF'd was Blood and Betrayals by Alexis, Rune, and Jeanette Rose. Basically, the premise of this book is like a dark academia romantasy. So the FMC Summer attends Avalon University, which is this really like prestigious university, and they accept like all types of like creatures, I guess. So she's like this rare kind of fae, and then her roommate is like a vampire, and I think there's also like werewolves and other kind of, not like creatures, but you know what I'm saying, at this university, and it's really hard to get into. She didn't even apply for it, she just got accepted, so she's trying to figure out who applied for her and what's going on. She also kind of figures out throughout the book that someone's like stalking her. So that's like the premise of it. Also, a little bit about the main character is she's supposed to be this like really like grumpy, hard to get to know, like doesn't like people type of character. It sounded good to me. So I started reading it and I DNF'd it at 10%. The FMC for me was like a little, not cringy, but it was just, I don't know, it was just hard to get into. So she was supposed to be this like grumpy, hard to get to know character who isn't great at like making friends, but she kind of just came across as like mean. And when I think of that type of character and I like them, they're usually just kind of socially awkward. So she kind of came across as like mean, and even though she's this person who like has a really hard time making friends, she ended up befriending her roommate within like 5 pages. So it just didn't really track for me that she like is someone who has a hard time making friends when she is making friends so quickly. And then also the writing was kind of unfocused. It would kind of go off in tangents and it was like hard to follow. Yeah, I just honestly wasn't really vibing with it overall. And I am disappointed because I saw on TikTok people were like raving about it. So if you've read it and it is like worth it, I will try reading it again because like the vibes seem really cool, but the writing just was not hitting for me. The next book I DNF'd was a novel love story by Ashley Poston. As I've said in earlier videos, I am going to a Julie Soto Ashley Poston event. I think it's actually next week, which is exciting. So I love Julie Soto. I've read 2 books by her, and then I have not read any Ashley Poston books. So I really want to read something by her before I go to this event. So I tried listening to this book as an audiobook because it was available immediately to me through my Libby app. So I just checked it out really quick. Basically, the premise is the female main character, Eileen, is on her way to this like long weekend reading retreat that she goes to every year with her friends. And this year, none of her friends can make it, but she still really wanted to go on this trip. So she's trying to go on this trip just by herself to this like cabin in the middle of nowhere to just spend a whole week in reading, which sounds amazing, by the way. I really want to do that. The way her and all her friends bonded and started like reading books together was there's this romance series that they all loved, and the author of the series had died before she could write the last book. They've all read the series a bunch of times and they always wish they could know how it ended, but unfortunately the author died. So on her way to this retreat, Eileen gets lost. There's like a bad storm. She gets turned around. Her phone doesn't have any service. And she ends up at this town that she doesn't know. And she has to stay with this like grumpy bookseller who also owns kind of like an Airbnb that she's staying in until she can like get back on the road. And that's kind of where I stopped the audiobook. And the only reason I DNF'd it was because I think I had a self realization journey that I can't listen to romance books. I only recently started listening to audiobooks last month, and the only audiobooks that I've listened to are kind of like thrillers, mysteries. And so I was like, oh, let me try this romance novel. And I don't know if like the plot wasn't as intense. I don't know what it was, but I kept kind of like zoning out, and then I'd have to keep going back and I couldn't remember what I read. And so I just DNF'd it because I think I just cannot listen to romance books as an audiobook. But the story was really interesting. The writing was really good. And I am looking forward to continuing the book. I have it on hold right now through my Libby, so hopefully it'll come up this week so I can read it before I go see Ashley Poston. But I actually was enjoying the book. I was just having a hard time listening to it. The last book I DNF'd this month was Shield of Sparrows by Devney Perry. I actually counted this book as finished in my Fable app purely because I literally spent 20 days trying to read this book. I got to 83% and I just literally couldn't do it anymore. So I counted it as finished, but I technically DNF'd it. So the premise of this book is the FMC is a princess in this fantasy world, and her younger sister was supposed to be the one that fulfills this treaty and marries the prince of another kingdom. And then, due to circumstances, the FMC is actually the one who ends up marrying this prince. And she leaves her home. She sets sail to this like other kingdom that she's now the princess slash queen of. It wasn't really clear. And then on the way, they like are fighting monsters. They get to the kingdom. She's trying to get to this like secret hidden city, but they never take her there. So she's kind of like forced to make camp in these like jungles, and they're constantly getting attacked by monsters. So yeah, and there's all this like different side stuff that she's trying to figure out. So I DNF'd this book at 83%. I just literally couldn't do it anymore. The first 30% of this book was really good. I was really engaged. I was really excited because I haven't read a romantasy book that I've actually enjoyed in a really long time. So my hopes were high for this book. And honestly, after 30% in, it just kind of fell off. The story got kind of repetitive. The world building wasn't great. It was, there's like, I think it was like 5 kingdoms in this country. And she really only focused on this one that the princess was in, which is fine because that's where she is. But the FMC would always talk about the cultural differences between her new kingdom and the one that she grew up in, but she would never really go into it. So it's kind of hard to understand like what the differences were between the 2 kingdoms, and also what the other kingdoms were kind of known for in that country. So I felt like that was kind of like poorly written about. And then it also felt just really repetitive. Like she'd be in this camp, and then all of a sudden monster would attack, and then the monster attacks were really interesting, but they're only like 5 pages long, and then she's back in this camp. And she did a lot of like, the main character did a lot of like inner monologuing, which I don't know why, it was just really bothering me. Like, instead of kind of letting the reader kind of create these questions themselves of like what's going on and all this stuff, the FMC was just constantly like asking questions. And I kind of was just like, I am asking those questions. Like, the way you're writing is leading me to ask those questions. I don't need the FMC to literally, there was at one point, I'm not even exaggerating, there was like a paragraph where the FMC just asked like 6 questions in a row. And I think that's where I DNF'd it, because I was like, I literally just can't read this anymore. Like, I just wasn't enjoying it. I really don't, I work a full-time job, so I don't have a lot of time to read. And the way I kind of judge a book is, if I'm at work all day and I'm not like excited to get home and read the books that I'm currently reading, I'm probably not enjoying it, and I'm just gonna like DNF it. So I DNF'd it, and luckily my friend was also reading this book at the same time, and so when I DNF'd it, she had just finished it, so I knew I could just be like, tell me what happened. And I had like a ton of theories about what was going on, my own answers to all these questions that the FMC kept asking. And I'm going to be honest, I liked my theories more than what my friend told me like actually happened with the plot. So I was really disappointed. I feel like this book was like the biggest disappointment for me in 2025, and I will not be continuing this series. That being said, I have heard really great things about this on TikTok. Like, people have been saying that this is their not only book of the year, but one of the best romantasy books they've ever read. So if you enjoyed it, like, let me know. I unfortunately just was not for me, I think, and I did not enjoy it. So those were the books that I DNF'd in June, and now we're going to talk about the books that I actually finished. I think I've said this before, but I'm a pretty slow reader, so I only finished 4 books in the month of June, but we'll take it. The first book that I finished was The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. I listened to this book as an audiobook. Basically, this book gave like good slasher summer vibes, which was kind of what I was looking for in the month of June. I was just really in the mood for like a good thriller, but it also had like kind of that summer camp feel. This definitely gave that aesthetic. What the premise of the book is, there's this summer camp and a counselor wakes up in the morning and realizes that one of her campers is missing. And unfortunately for, the counselor, this camper is the daughter of the owners of the camp, and they're like a very rich, powerful family. So the book kind of starts out with the search for this missing daughter. And as they search, they start to realize maybe her disappearance has something to do with her brother's disappearance that happened 20 years ago. So it kind of goes into that, and it was really interesting. The mystery was really good. I kind of like never really knew where it was going to go, and it had me on the edge of my seat. And what I really, really liked about it was the book had it had a ton of different point of views. I want to say like 5 to 10 different point of views. And it also followed kind of two timelines. So it followed the timeline, I think it was in like the 70s or the 80s when the 16-year-old daughter disappeared. And then it also followed the timeline in like the 50s or 60s when her brother, who at the time was like 10 maybe, when he disappeared. So, it had all these different point of views, different timelines, but they all like blended together really well, and each point of view added so much to the story. And so I was just honestly kind of amazed with how Liz Moore was able to like weave all these different point of views together, weave these two different disappearances together. That was really good. The thing that I was disappointed about was the ending. I felt like it was a little anticlimactic. I was just a little disappointed by the ending, honestly. So I did really like the book, though. I thought it had a lot of interesting things to say about like America's class system, gender roles within America, and it was a really good book, though, and I did really enjoy it. So I would recommend if you are in the mood for like a slasher summer vibe, but I will say that's only like a small part of the book. So if that's really, really what you're looking for, I wouldn't recommend this book. But if you're looking for a good like mystery, I would recommend this book. The next book that I finished in June was The Thrashers by Julie Soto. This book kind of gave a mix of like, I Know What You Did Last Summer and One of Us Is Lying. So it was pretty good. It was a YA thriller, which is kind of a different vibe from Julie Soto. In the past, she's written adult romances. So this was kind of a different shift. But when I was reading it, I could still really tell that it was like Julie Soto's writing. She just has such like an addictive form of writing. Like every sentence, you just want to like keep reading and know what happens next. And so this book definitely felt like a Julie Soto book. So the premise of it was the FMC Jody is in this like notorious friend group at her high school. They're kind of this like well-known clique called the Thrashers, and everyone in the school calls them the Thrashers because they're all really good friends with basically the school's golden boy, Zach Thrasher. The book focuses on their senior year of high school, but we find out early in the book that their junior year of high school, there was this sophomore named Emily, and she really wanted to like be a part of this friend group. And she was kind of one of those girls where she like couldn't really take a hint. And so nobody in the group really liked her, but they put up with her basically. And so she wasn't really getting a hint that nobody liked her, and she kind of forced herself onto this group. So their junior prom night the year before, Emily committed suicide, and everyone in the school blames this friend group. They say that, they bullied her and they drove her to suicide basically. So the book focuses on their senior year and the friend group kind of dealing with the aftermath of that. Basically, like Emily's journal is found, and there's like a lot of accusations made towards the friend group. And Jody, the main character, is trying to figure out what's true. Are her friends lying? Are they telling the truth? Can she trust them? And then also, all these bad things keep happening to this friend group throughout the book that makes it kind of seem like Emily is haunting them. So it was a really like twisty book. I literally never knew what was going to happen next, and I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. I devoured this book. I think I read it in like 3 days, which for me is like really, really fast. So I really enjoyed it. And then if you are going to read it, do not like I used to do this all the time when I would read like physical books, but I'd like read the ending and then I would read the beginning. Do not read the ending. The ending literally had my like jaw on the floor, and it made me immediately want to reread the whole book again with the knowledge that I had from the ending. So the way it ended, I was kind of like, it might be a sequel. I don't really know. I kind of hope it is because I really liked it. So I would highly recommend this book. Julie Soto, I read a 5-star book of hers, Not Another Love Song, in January. And The Thrashers was another 5-star read for me. So I'm really excited to go see her next week for her book release party. And I can't wait to get this book signed by her. The next book I finished in June was When the Crow's Away by Auralee Wallace. I listened to this book as an audiobook. This book is a sequel to In the Company of Witches, which I listened to last month. It had a similar premise. Basically, the main character, Bryn, is a witch. She has the power to talk to ghosts, and the ghost that she's talking to is claiming that he has just been murdered. And so she's trying to figure out, one, if that's true, and two, if it was, what happened. And yeah, so it had a really similar premise to the first one. It was just as cute and cozy as the first book. For both books, in my opinion, the mystery felt like a little flat. I don't know why. I don't know. The mysteries were okay, but the vibes were good. It was very cozy. I do wish in the second book that the aunts of Bryn made more of an appearance, because they are some of my favorite characters. They're just really funny. So they weren't as prominent in this book. I know Auralee Wallace is coming out with another book, I think this fall. And I want to say it's called like The Late Night Witches. I could be wrong, but I think that's what it's called. So I'm excited to read that. That has nothing to do with this series. It's like kind of a standalone book. And then the way When the Crow's Away finished made it seem like a third book is coming to this series. So I am excited to read that whenever it ends up coming out. But yeah, I still liked it. It just, it's not the best mystery of all time, but the vibes are really good. The last book I finished in June was Give Me Butterflies by Jillian Meadows. I was really disappointed by this book. So basically, the premise of the book, and it's marketed as a STEM romance. The FMC Millie is an entomology curator at a museum, and she's in line for the role of director of this like entomology department at the museum. So she's like in the process of interviewing for that role. The MMC, Finn, is the director of astronomy also at this museum, and he's on the hiring board of Millie's like director job. Basically, the two of them in the past have never really like interacted or gotten along. He's kind of posed as this like grumpy character. And then Finn also has recently come into guardianship of his two nieces, and so he's kind of learning how to balance like his personal life with the new life of like a dad. And so it's kind of their story of like, how their lives end up weaving together, Finn and Millie, and like that sort of thing. So I was like, the way this was marketed was as a STEM romance. And I love a STEM romance because not only does it like focus on women in cool jobs, it will also focus on the woman having a ton of knowledge of her specific role, which I always think is really fun to read about. So I had high hopes for this, but really the only thing Millie really talked about with her job was like, I prepped butterflies for today's class. I don't know. It was just kind of like not as in depth as I was hoping. And honestly, the most of the book was spent like outside of work. It really didn't focus that much on the museum and like Finn and Millie's jobs at the museum. A lot of it was like at a cafe or like Finn's house or like her family's farm. Like it really did not focus at all on the museum. And so I just don't think it was like fair to like phrase it as a STEM romance, because a STEM romance to me is not only focusing on like the STEM aspect, but also almost kind of like a workplace romance. And I just really, that was not really the vibe that was given with this book. I also didn't love this book because it was very like insta love. It felt like the author was kind of trying to write a bunch of different tropes all at once, and instead of just kind of letting their relationship like organically grow. And it kind of started out as like enemies to lovers for like the first 10%, but then all of a sudden they were cool, and then all of a sudden they're like best friends. I don't know, it was just like their relationship progressed so quickly, and for them to like kind of hate each other and then all of a sudden they're like in love with each other. It was kind of like whiplash almost. And then the end of the book got really long. Like I just kind of wanted to wrap up at a certain point. So overall, it was a cute story. I did really like the author's writing style. I thought she was a really good writer. There were like a ton of moments in the book that had me actually like giggling because they were so cute. So, you know, if you're just looking for a simple romance, I would recommend it, but just know it's not really like a STEM romance. I think this book is part of like a series, the Oaks Sisters series. So the other books in the series will follow like Millie's sisters. So I will be reading those because I did really like the author's writing style. I just think this overall story like wasn't my favorite romance that I've ever read. Okay, and then to wrap up the video, I'm just going to talk about the books that I'm currently reading. So I'm currently listening to Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. I'm 76% of the way through this audiobook. If you're a fan of the Haunting of Hill House show that was on Netflix, it like came out like 5 years ago, you will like this book. Basically, the premise is the FMC's family infamously fled their haunted house when the main character was like 5 years old, and she doesn't remember any of it. Immediately after this encounter, her dad wrote this really famous book about their time at the house. So she grew up with like everyone always wanting to talk to her about this book, and her family never talked about their time there. She doesn't remember it, so she kind of doesn't know if it's true or not, but she's always just kind of accepted that this book was a lie and kind of like a money grab for her dad, which it was very successful, and her family like had a lot of wealth from it. So fast forward 25 years, her dad dies and leaves her his entire estate plus the house, Baneberry Manor. And so she's like gone her whole life believing that her dad lied and that this like her family's legacy was just this huge massive lie. But as she goes back to the house to kind of like fix it up and prep it to sell it, she starts to like question everything. It's actually really interesting. So it's two different point of views. So the main point of view is the main character and her journey through like after her dad died, kind of like fixing up this house. And then the second point of view is her dad's book. And so they read like a different chapter every day because the family was only at this house for like 20 days or something after they bought it. And so each chapter is a different day that the family like experienced something, all from her dad's point of view. And so it's kind of a fun book to read because, you know, you're watching the daughter kind of deal with different house stuff. And then every chapter you get a little more information about like what happened and why her family left. And as a reader, you don't know who to trust. You don't know if her dad's lying or not and stuff, you know, there's just a lot of questions. So I'm 76% of the way through the book. I honestly don't know how it's going to end, but I do really like it. And I love Riley Sager's like writing style. He's just a really good thriller writer. Okay, and then the book that I'm actually reading on my Kindle right now is Empire of Shadows by Jacquelyn Benson. This book is like everything I was hoping Give Me Butterflies would be. I'm only 19% of the way in. I just started it a few days ago, so I'm not very far in, but I'm really enjoying it so far. I will say the prologue of this book is like, you know, your Kindle will tell you like how long a book is or a chapter is. So most of the chapters in this book for me are like 15 to 20 minutes. The prologue was like 35 minutes long. So it was a really long prologue, and it was a little hard to get into the book because in the back of your mind, you know, these characters don't really matter because it's a prologue and it's kind of like setting up the treasure that the, you know, main character is going after. So those characters in the prologue like just didn't really matter and weren't super important to the story. So it was a little hard to get into because in the back of my head I was like, I don't really care about these people, like no offense, but then I got to chapter 1 and the story like immediately gripped me. I literally have been laughing out loud at this book. It is so funny. So basically the premise is the main character, Emily, she's like a records keeper kind of, and she gets fired because she was arrested. She was protesting in support of the women's suffrage movement in 1890 London, and she got arrested at this rally, which was supposed to be peaceful, but she accidentally like turned it into a riot. the main character is so funny. So then because she got arrested, she gets fired from her job as like a records keeper organizer, curator. I'm gonna have to look back. I can't remember exactly what her role was. As she's being fired, she accidentally like stumbles upon this old kind of like treasure map to this lost city in Honduras. And so she just decides right then and there she's going to go on this like archaeological expedition and try and discover this lost city herself. Once she gets to Honduras, she needs a guide to lead her through this basically uncivilized part of the country. Like nobody goes there. It's uncharted. And this American, I'm not very far in, but I'm assuming he ends up being her guide. And I just, oh my gosh. So basically, if you liked The Mummy, the original Mummy, not the Tom Cruise Mummy, the one with Brendan Fraser, you will like this book. For me, it's because I loved What the River Knows. It's kind of giving What the River Knows, but a little more humorous. And I'm just really enjoying it so far. I was going to read you like a quote that I highlighted because I just actually like this book has had me like laughing out loud. Okay, so this was very early on in the book. It doesn't give anything away, but basically the way they met is so funny. Yeah, so I'm just going to read this quote. If you do want to read this book and want like absolutely no spoilers, skip ahead, but I just thought this was so funny. So here's the quote. So Emily says, "What I did not need was some mud-drenched lunatic barging into the washroom with a sword." And he says, "Sorry I wasn't up to your standards of hygiene when I came to your rescue." She said, "This has nothing to do with hygiene." The banter is hilarious. These two are so funny. Yeah. I'm really enjoying this book. I'm really excited to keep reading it and see where it goes. And I'm pretty sure there's a second book in the series that's already out. So if it is, I will be following up fast with that book. So that's all the books that I read in the month of June. Thank you so much for listening. If you had any thoughts about the books I read or DNF'd, or have recommendations based off the books that I read, please comment below, and I will talk to you guys soon.